Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tuning into the frequency we call the ABENG signal.
That's right.
And if you've been riding with us for the last 9 episodes, you know exactly what that means. We are not here to skim the surface.
No, definitely not.
We are not here for the Wikipedia summary or, the high school textbook version of history. We are here to get into the marrow.
We're here to listen to the signal under the noise. And today, that signal is coming from a very specific place and time that I think usually gets glossed over. We're looking at Jamaica between roughly 1760 and 1830.
Right, and usually when we talk about this era, the history books operate like a highlight reel of explosions.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
You see the ships landing. Horrific. Then we fast forward 50 years to a rebellion fire, muskets, Tacky's War. Then we fast forward another 30 years to the Baptist War. Then emancipation. It's like a movie that cuts out the entire second act.
Exactly. We see the beginning and the end, but we miss the middle. And the middle is where the actual life happened. It's where the culture was, it's where it was cooked.
Right.
It's where the trauma was endured, yes, but also where the resistance was practiced every single day in 1,000 tiny ways.
So our mission for this deep dive, episode 10 of the ABENG signal, is to hit the brakes. We are going to slow down and examine the decades between the great rebellions.
We're stepping into the day-to-day.
We are going to look at the daily grind, the Monday through Saturday reality. And I want to set the stage with the title of this dive, Cane, Whips, and Drums. Because when I was reading through the source material you sent over, those 3 things felt like the heartbeat of the whole system.
They are the 3 rhythms, absolutely.
Yeah.
You have the cane, that's the labor, the industry, the relentless demand of the crop.
The engine of the whole thing.
Exactly. Then you have the whip, the discipline, the terror, the metronome of the field that keeps that engine running.
And then you have the drum.
And then you have the drum. The drum is the counter rhythm.
The spirit.
The spirit. It's the refusal to be fully owned. It's the connection to the ancestors, the community, to Africa. So today isn't just about economic data, though we have plenty of that. It's a heart-level deep dive.
Yes.
We're going to walk through a single day and night on a Jamaican sugar estate, from the first horn blast before the sun comes up to the last whispered prayer in the dark.
I love that approach. So I want you, the listener, to do something cinematic with us. I want you to build a world in your head. We're stepping onto a large sugar estate in Jamaica, let's say around 1790.
1790 is a perfect time.
We want to get inside the world.
Yeah.
We want to move away from the statistics and the ledgers for a bit and get right down to the ground level. What did it smell like? What did it sound like? And I think most importantly, how did people survive it without losing their minds?
That is the absolute key question. It's what the research calls the heart level story. It's not just about what was done to them. It's about how you maintain your humanity in a system that is fundamentally designed to strip it away.
So let's set the scene. Let's talk about what the sources call the geography of power. When you say sugar estate, I think a lot of people have a sort of generic picture in their heads, maybe something from a movie like Gone with the Wind, but, tropical.
Right, a very romanticized image.
But the layout of a Jamaican estate was incredibly specific, wasn't it? It was a machine.
It was absolutely a machine, but it was a panopticon, a prison without walls designed for maximum visibility and psychological control. If you were to just close your eyes and map this out in your head, you have to start with topography. Jamaica is mountainous. So you have the Great House. And where is it always located?
It's up on the hill, always.
Always on the hill. And that isn't just for the breeze, though I'm sure the breeze was nice.
It's a nice perk here.
It's about dominance. It's about what was called the surveying eye. From the Great House veranda, the planter, or maybe the attorney who managed the estate, could look down and see everything. They could see the factory works, they could see the cane fields stretching out, and they could see the slave village. The entire world was laid out beneath them.
It's basically a guard tower.
Precisely.
Right.
It creates this constant psychological weight. Even if the planter isn't physically on the veranda looking, you feel like he's looking. You are always under the gaze of that big white building on the hill.
Yeah.
It creates a vertical hierarchy that perfectly matches the social hierarchy. The white master is physically above you. You are physically below him. It reinforces the order of the world every single time you look up.
And then down in the valley, you have the industrial center, the boiling house.
Which we will absolutely get into later, but just visually think about the contrast for a second. Up on the hill, you have this manicured, breezy, whitewashed architecture, what they called civilization.
Right, orderly.
And down in the valley, you have smoke, you have fire, you have grinding gears, the smell of burning sugar and sweat. That's the boiling house. It's the engine room of the whole operation. It's where the profit is literally squeezed and boiled into existence. And it is a place of intense, dangerous, round-the-clock industry.
And then pushed to the margins, usually on the worst land, the least arable land, you have the slave village, the huntmans.
Right, and marginal is the key word there. They were not going to waste good cane-growing soil on housing for the workers. So the village is often tucked away, sometimes near a ravine or a rocky outcrop. But here's the really interesting thing about that geography. That marginalization created a kind of blind spot.
A blind spot? How so?
Well, because it was pushed to the edge, because it was down there, it became a space the planter didn't really want to go.
Yeah.
Especially not at night.
It wasn't his territory.
There's the one place on the entire estate where the white gaze couldn't quite penetrate the darkness. And that becomes absolutely crucial for the drums part of our story later on.
So the layout itself dictates the life. You have the surveillance from above, the industrial hell in the middle, and this little pocket of community on the edge. I want to circle back to that community space, because looking at the research, the layout of the slave village itself wasn't just like a random collection of huts, was it?
No, not at all. And this is where a lot of the archaeological evidence really helps us see the past in a new way. The slave villages, or Negro yards as they were called on the old maps, were these really dynamic spaces. They weren't just dormitories where people slept.
Right. I'm looking at this diagram from the sources of a typical layout. The huts are small, maybe wattle and daub with thatched roofs.
Very organic materials, mud, sticks, palm thatch, which, meant they were relatively cool in the day but could be damp and cold at night. But what's so fascinating is how they were arranged. They weren't usually in straight military-style rows like a barracks. They were often clustered.
In what way?
In family compounds. And this is a direct echo of West African village structures. You might have a main hut and then some smaller structures around a central yard. And that yard is the crucial part. That's where life happened.
Because the hut is really just for sleeping. It's tiny.
Exactly. The hut is dark, it's small, it's smoky. But the yard, that's where you cook your food. That's where you wash your clothes. It's where the children play. It's where you sit and gossip with your neighbor over a low fence. It's the living room.
So even within the total confinement of the estate, they were recreating African spatial patterns. They were building a world they recognized.
They were asserting a cultural memory through architecture. And the planters often hated this. They wanted straight lines. They wanted order they could understand. They wanted to be able to look down from the great house and see neat, controllable rows. But the enslaved people would plant fruit trees, mango, ackee, breadfruit, all around their huts.
And that wasn't just for food, was it?
The food was vital, of course. But it also served another purpose. It provided a screen of privacy. If you grow a dense thicket of banana trees and coconut palms around your yard, the overseer on his horse can't just ride by and see what you're doing in there.
That is brilliant. It's literally landscape architecture as an act of resistance.
It is. It's a quiet way of saying, you can own this land, but you can't see me. You don't own my space. And inside those hidden yards, that's where the spiritual practices we'll talk about could happen more safely. That's where you could hide or run away for a night. That's where you could just be.
It creates a psychological buffer zone, a place to breathe.
A very thin one, but yes. And we have to mention the sanitation here, or the lack of it. These villages were often downstream from the industrial works from the Great House. So you're dealing with runoff, contaminated water, mosquitoes. The mortality rate in these villages was just horrific.
So it's a place of comfort because it's home, but it's also a place of disease and death because of the conditions.
That is the terrible duality of it. It was their sanctuary, but it was a sanctuary built in a swamp.
Okay, let's start the clock. We are walking through a day on this estate, and the day doesn't start with the sun.
No, it starts well before the sun. It starts in the pitch dark.
The sources describe this haunting sound, the blowing of the shell, a conch shell.
The ABENG. It's a sound that just cuts through the pre-dawn darkness and the mist, and you have to imagine the psychological trigger of that sound.
Yeah.
You're in a deep sleep. Maybe you've only had 4 or 5 hours because you were up late grinding cane during harvest. And that sound hits you. It's not a gentle alarm clock, it's a command. It means your time is no longer your own.
When you have to move. Immediately.
Immediately. This is the process they called lining out. The entire enslaved community has to assemble in the yard. And it's here that we see the first layer of the on-the-ground hierarchy. You aren't just a mass of people, you are organized. You are divided into gangs.
This was something I found really, for lack of a better word, corporate about it. The structure of it. It wasn't random at all.
Oh, it was brutally efficient.
Yeah.
You typically had 3 main gangs. The first gang, or the Great Gang, that was made up of the strongest, fittest men and women. These are your prime field hands. They were doing the heaviest, most physically demanding work, digging the cane holes, cutting the crop during harvest.
Then the second gang.
That would be teenagers, pregnant women, maybe older folks who are past their physical peak but still capable. They're doing weeding, clearing trash from the fields, slightly lighter, but let's be clear, still backbreaking work.
And the third gang. It's hard to even talk about this.
Children. The grass gang or pot gang. Little kids, sometimes as young as 5 or 6 years old, supervised by an elderly woman who is usually called the driveress. They're out there picking grass for the livestock, carrying water to the fields. They are being socialized into the rhythm of forced labor from the moment they can walk.
And overseeing this entire lineup, you have the driver. And we really need to unpack the driver because this is such a complex and tragic figure. The sources describe him as the most compromised person on the entire estate.
He is the ultimate tragic figure. You have to think about his daily reality. He wakes up before everyone else. He has to report to the overseer, the white manager, to get the orders for the day. Today, we are cutting the north field. Today, we are digging cane holes in the bottom piece.
And he knows what that work actually entails. He knows how hard the ground is, how hot the sun will be.
He knows exactly how hard it is. He's done it. Drivers were almost always promoted from the ranks of the first gang. They were strong, capable, experienced. So he knows the pain intimately. But now his job is to inflict that same pain on his own people.
Do they have a choice in this? Could you just say, no thanks, I don't want to be a driver?
Not really, no. If the master says you're a driver, you're a driver. Refusing a role like that was a direct act of rebellion, and it would be punished severely. But you also have to think about the incentives, the terrible bargains. If you're a driver, maybe your wife gets lighter work. Your children might be treated a little better. You get an extra ration of rum. You get a coat with brass buttons.
These symbols of authority.
And symbols of separation. That coat sets him apart visually from everyone else. He holds a staff, or more often, a whip. He doesn't hold a hoe. He's management now.
But the community, they must have hated him.
Sometimes, absolutely. There are many accounts of drivers who are despised, who are brutal sadists, who use their power to sexually exploit the women in the gangs. You know, sleep with me or I'll make sure you get the hardest row to hoe tomorrow.
That's just horrific. A total abuse of power.
It is. But, and this is where history is so nuanced, there are also accounts of drivers who were protectors, who would crack the whip loud in the air, making a show of it, but never actually hit anyone, who would hiss a warning to the gang, overseer coming, so they could speed up just in time to avoid punishment.
So he's playing this double game.
A very, very dangerous double game. Because if the overseer catches him going soft, the driver gets whipped himself, often in front of the gang.
And the whip driver loses all authority.
Exactly. So he has to maintain this terrifying facade just to survive, while maybe, just maybe, trying to mitigate the worst of the brutality. It's an impossible position.
It tears the community apart from the inside. It pits black against black.
That was the entire design. Divide and conquer. If the strongest, most respected man is the one enforcing the rules, who is going to lead the rebellion against him?
But interestingly, and we'll get to this in the later deep docs, in the 1831 rebellion, some of the key leaders were drivers.
Exactly, because they had the organizational skills. They knew how to move large groups of people. They knew the geography of the estates. When the drivers flipped, the entire system collapsed. And that's why the planters were so profoundly shocked in 1831. They'd say, but my faithful headman, how could he do this?
They mistook coercion for loyalty, which brings us right to the second rhythm, the whip. I think, again, in movies, we see the whip used for punishment. You know, someone tries to run away, they get whipped. Someone talks back, they get whipped. But the sources are really clear that the whip wasn't just for crimes. It was for efficiency.
That is a crucial distinction to make. We have to understand the whip as an economic tool. It was the metronome of the field.
The metronome. I've never heard it put that way.
Think about it. You have a line of 30 people digging cane holes.
Right.
They have to move in unison, like a single machine. If one person slows down, the whole line slows down. And that costs the planter money, so the driver stands behind the line. If you lag, if you stumble from exhaustion, the whip snaps.
So not necessarily a full flogging every time.
Not every time, no, but it's a lick, a sharp reminder. It's the sound of it, the threat of it.
It's terror as a productivity hack.
It is exactly that. It's discipline enforced through constant terror. And you have to think about the psychological toll of that. You aren't just working hard. You are working with your ears constantly pricked for the sound of that lash, fully aware that your physical safety depends on maintaining a pace that is almost inhuman.
And this goes on from sunup until the sun is high in the sky.
Until midday. There's usually a short break for breakfast, which is often just a piece of roasted yam or something eaten right there in the field, and then it's back to it. But I want to pause on the sensory experience of being in that field. It's not just the hard labor, it's the cane itself.
What do you mean?
Cane leaves are sharp. They have these little serrated edges that cut your skin. The fields are full of insects, rats, snakes, and it's hot. The cane rows are planted so densely that there's no airflow. You're essentially working in a humid green oven surrounded by razor blades.
And you're doing this under the constant, immediate threat of violence. That's the rhythm of the morning. So While the gangs are out there in the field, there's a whole other world operating on the estate. The sources talk about the hierarchy of labor. Not everyone was in the field. You had the skilled workers, the tradesmen.
Right. The aristocracy of labor, so to speak. People like carpenters, cupels who made the barrels for the sugar and rum, blacksmiths, masons, and of course, the boilermen.
Let's talk about the boilermen, because on paper, this looks like a better job. You're not out in the sun. You have a highly specialized skill. You're valuable.
You are extremely valuable. A good head boilerman could literally determine the profitability of the entire crop for the year. Making sugar is complex chemistry. You have to boil the cane juice to the exact crystallization point. Too long, it burns and you get low-grade molasses. Too short, it doesn't cure properly.
So they had a certain status.
They had immense status within the enslaved community. They were often leaders. But,
All right.
and this is a huge but, it was phenomenally dangerous work. I want to take the listener inside the boiling house for a moment. We touched on it, but the sensory details in the source material are just intense. It's often described as hell on earth.
That's not an exaggeration. You have to picture this large, dark stone building. Inside, you have a battery of coppers, these huge open metal bowls set into masonry with fires raging underneath them 24 hours a day.
And it's continuous, right? Once harvest starts, those fires do not go out. For months, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. The cane is crushed in the mill, which is dangerous in itself. People getting fingers and arms caught in the rollers was a common and horrific accident. Then that juice flows into the boiling house.
And the smell.
Oh, it's overwhelming. Sweet, sickly, burning sugar, thick smoke from the fires, smell of sweat, and the noise. The boilermen are shouting instructions over the roar of the flames. Fire too hot, skim the trash. They're using these long, heavy ladles to move the boiling, viscous liquid from one copper to the next, reducing it down.
And the humidity must have been off the charts.
100%. It's a steam bath, and these men are often working semi-naked because of the intense heat. Now imagine doing that for an 18-hour shift. Your focus starts to drift, your movements get slower.
And that's when the accidents happen.
A single splash of boiling sugar is like napalm. It sticks to the skin and burns right through. But here's the other danger. Simple exhaustion. There are multiple accounts of tired workers stumbling, losing their balance, and falling into the coppers of boiling sugar.
Oh my God.
It's gruesome. But we have to look at it. This was the real cost of the sugar in your tea. Every single grain of sugar represented a risk of life and limb.
And yet, the boilermen took a great deal of pride in this.
They absolutely did. It was a craft. A master boiler could look at the bubbling syrup and know, just by the way the bubbles broke on the surface, exactly when to strike it, to move it to the cooling trough. It was alchemy. They were chemists without degrees. And the planter had to respect that skill. He needed that skill.
So a boilerman could get away with things a field hand couldn't.
Sometimes. A little more back chat, a bit more freedom of movement around the works, maybe stealing some sugar or rum to trade on the side. The planter might turn a blind eye because, again, you don't want to upset the guy who controls your entire profit margin for the year.
Then there's that other group of so-called privileged workers. The domestic servants. The people inside the great house.
This is a group that history, I think, often really misunderstands. We tend to think, oh, they had it easy, they wore nice clothes, they ate the leftovers from the master's table, they didn't have to toil in the sun.
But the reality was far more complicated.
It was a gilded cage. Yes, you weren't out in the sun, but you were under the microscope, 24/7. In the field, you at least have the anonymity of the crowd. In the great house, you are one-on-one with the enslaver, with their family. You are there for their every whim at every moment.
There is absolutely no privacy.
None. You are on call day and night. And we have to talk about the proximity to abuse. For the women especially, being a domestic servant meant being in constant, unavoidable proximity to sexual violence. The great house was not a safe space. It was a place of high, constant anxiety.
And the emotional labor.
Unimaginable. You had to perform happiness. You had to smile while serving the very people who owned you, who may have just sold your child. That is a different kind of exhaustion. In the field, your body is exhausted. In the house, your soul, your spirit is exhausted.
Just a different kind of hell.
Precisely. And the resentment was often palpable. You are seeing the wealth being generated from your people's blood right in front of you every day. You are serving the wine bought with the sugar your brother is cutting outside. The psychological dissonance of that must have been just excruciating.
So we have the work, the cane and the whip. But people have to eat. And this, for me, was one of the most surprising parts of the deep dive, the whole economy of food. You just assume the slave owners provided all the food, right? I mean, just to keep their investment alive.
That's a logical assumption. But in Jamaica and much of the Caribbean, that just wasn't the case. The rations provided by the estate, usually some salted fish or salted pork, maybe some cornmeal, were woefully inadequate. They were starvation rations, basically.
Well, how did they possibly survive?
They had to grow their own food. The entire system relied on the provision grounds. These were plots of land, usually way up in the mountains or on the rocky, useless terrain we talked about earlier, given to the enslaved people to cultivate on their own time.
Which means weekends?
Sundays, mostly. And maybe Saturday afternoons if the planter was feeling benevolent. So after working a 14-hour day, 6 days a week, your day off was spent hiking up a mountain to farm yams, plantains, cocoa, and vegetables just to keep your family from starving to death.
Let's expand on these provision grounds and the higglers, because this feels like a really important part of the story. It's where the enslaved people created their own rhythm, completely separate from the estate's schedule.
It is the absolute seed of the Jamaican peasantry. You see, the planters were cheap, fundamentally. They didn't want to spend money importing food from Britain or America for hundreds of enslaved people, so they just said, go feed yourself.
Which is just profoundly cynical.
Extremely cynical. Work for me for free all week, and then go work for yourself on Sunday just so you have the energy to work for me again on Monday. But the unintended consequence of this was that the enslaved people became expert agriculturists, not of cane, but of real food. Yams, cassava, bananas, plantains, all sorts of vegetables.
And they had to manage this land entirely on their own.
They had to clear it, plant it, weed it, harvest it. And because the land was often miles away from the village, walking there was a journey in itself. But that walk, that time on the provision ground, was also social time. It was time away from the white days.
And then if they grew more than they needed for themselves.
That's where the markets come in. If you had a surplus, you could sell it. And this brings us to the higgler.
The higgler, what an incredible figure.
An absolute institution, usually women. They would take the surplus produce, maybe load it onto a donkey if they were very lucky, but more often carry it on their heads. These huge, heavy baskets, walking 10, 15 miles to the nearest market town.
The physical stamina required for that is just incredible.
It is. But think about the mental stamina. They arrive at the market, they set up their stall, and they start trading. They are doing complex math in their heads, converting different currencies, haggling, bargaining.
This yam is worth 6 pence? No, it's 4 pence, take it or leave it.
And they were tough. The sources show they effectively controlled the local food economy. There were times when the white population of the towns would complain to the government that the higglers were price fixing or holding back produce to drive up prices.
That's market manipulation. That's capitalism.
It is. These women were capitalists operating inside a system of chattel slavery. They understood supply and demand better than anyone. And the money they made, and this is key, it was theirs. By custom, if not by law, the planters generally respected what was called the peculium, the money and property earned by enslaved people.
Why? Why wouldn't they just take it?
Because it was a safety valve. It kept the peace. If you take away the one thing that gives people a full belly and a tiny bit of hope, you get a rebellion tomorrow. It was cheaper to let them have their market than to pay for soldiers.
But that money could, in theory, buy freedom.
It was incredibly hard. The price of manumission was very high. But it could buy status. It could buy a fancy lace dress to wear for the Christmas carnival. You could buy a pig to roast for a wedding feast. It allowed for moments of celebration and dignity.
It allowed them to be consumers, not just property to be consumed.
What a perfect way to put it, yes. And the travel. A higgler might have a pass from the overseer to go to market. That pass gave her mobility. It gave her a reason to be on the road. And on that road, she could carry messages between estates. Tell Kwamina at the next estate that we are meeting tonight in the woods.
So the market network was also the intelligence network for resistance.
Without a doubt. The Great Rebellion of 1831 traveled along the market routes. The news spread from market woman to market woman faster than the British mail could ride on horseback. They turned the landscape, the very roads, against the enslaver. The planters thought they owned the island, but the higglers knew its paths and secrets better.
This brings us to, the absolute core of humanity family. You can strip someone's rights, you can whip their back, but the sources are so clear that you could not stop them from falling in love.
Resistance isn't just about fighting back with a weapon. Sometimes resistance is just loving someone when the entire world is telling you that you're an object incapable of love. Courtship happened. Flirting happened. People found partners and built lives together.
But marriage wasn't legally recognized, was it?
Not in the eyes of British law, not for a long time, but that didn't stop them for a second. They had their own ceremonies. Jumping the broom is the one most people know, but there were many different traditions carried over from Africa. They created vast and complex kinship networks. They named their children.
The naming is so important.
It's crucial. The planter might write Tom or Sarah in his ledger, but in the slave village, that child might be known as Cuffy, meaning born on a Friday, or Kwashiba, born on a Sunday. They kept the Eken day names from West Africa alive. Using those names was a secret code. It was a way of saying, we know who we really are, even if you don't.
But there's this dark cloud hanging over all of this, a constant threat of separation.
This is the heartbreak that underlies every single moment of joy. At any moment, due to a planter's bankruptcy, a death in the master's family, or just a pure whim, the estate could be sold, or parts of it.
Which means your husband, your wife, your child could be put on an auction block and sent to the other side of the island.
Or to another island entirely, never to be seen again. The fear of sale was a constant, gnawing anxiety. It was the ultimate weapon of psychological control. Behave, or I'll sell your son to a coffee plantation.
How do you live with that? How do you even let yourself love someone knowing they could be ripped away from you tomorrow?
That's the profound bravery of it, isn't it? To love anyway, to build a family anyway. It was the ultimate act of defiance. By building these kinship networks, godparents, aunties, and uncles who weren't blood relatives, they created a safety net. If a mother was sold, the village really did raise the child. They refused to let the system destroy their bonds of care. It's an incredible testament to the strength of the human spirit.
So the sun goes down. The work is done for now. The market is over. And we move into the third rhythm, the drum.
Nightfall. This is when the estate truly transforms. During the day, the land belongs to the planter, but at night, the land belongs to the spirits and to the people.
The sources talk about these secret schools of memory. What exactly does that mean?
Well, there were no formal schools. It was illegal to teach an enslaved person to read or write. So how do you preserve your history? How do you teach the next generation where they come from? You tell stories.
Anansi story.
Anansi the spider, the trickster god from West Africa. And these were not just cute bedtime stories for kids. They were lessons in survival. Anansi is small and physically weak, but he always outsmarts the lion and the tiger, the powerful ones. He uses his wits.
He's the original resistance fighter.
He is. He teaches the children. You are smaller than the master. You don't have the gun or the whip, but you have your mind. You can trick him. These stories were political education wrapped up in folklore.
And this would happen around the fire in the village yard, away from the great house.
Right. Where the overseer was afraid to go. They spoke their own languages, patois, which was mixed with Twi, Igbo, Yoruba words. They passed down proverbs. Rock stone, a river bottom, no sun hot. The stone at the bottom of the river doesn't know how hot the sun is.
Meaning the master, in his great house, has no idea what our suffering is really like.
Exactly. And then deeper into the night, we get to the spiritual warfare. And I want to go a little deeper into this. We mentioned Myal and Obeah, but I think for a modern listener, it can be hard to grasp just how real this was for them. This wasn't superstition. This was a battle for survival on a spiritual plane.
Right, it's a completely different worldview.
You have to step out of the Western rationalist mindset. In the worldview of the enslaved West African and their descendants, the spiritual world and the physical world are not separate things. They are layered on top of each other, constantly interacting.
So a sickness isn't just a virus. It has a spiritual cause.
Precisely. A sickness might be a virus, yes, but why did it hit me? Why now? Is it a curse sent by an enemy? Is it a disturbed ancestor showing their displeasure? Is it the malice of the overseer manifesting as a physical illness?
So Obeah was the technology to deal with that spiritual dimension.
Obeah was the expert knowledge. An Obeah man or woman knew the properties of herbs, roots, minerals, and yes, poisons. They knew how to make a guard, a charm, an amulet to protect your house from evil spirits or your body from harm.
Like a spiritual bulletproof vest.
That's a great analogy. If you have an Obeah guard buried at your doorstep, you feel safe. You feel that the driver's whip can't hurt you as much, and that psychological confidence is real. If you believe you are protected, you stand taller. You might even look the white man in the eye.
And the planters were absolutely terrified of this.
Terrified. They passed draconian laws against Obeah. They would execute Obeah men and women. And you have to ask why. Because Obeah represented a power structure they did not control. If the enslaved people fear the Obeah man more than they fear the master, then the master has lost fundamental control.
And then there's the question of poison.
That was the planter's ultimate nightmare. The Obeah practitioners knew plants. They knew which bush could make you sick for a week and which could kill you slowly over months. So many planters and overseers died under what were called mysterious circumstances. Stomach pains, a wasting sickness.
So the fear went both ways. The slave feared the whip, but the master fueled the poison in his soup.
It created a constant low-level Cold War of terror on the estate.
And Myal, you said that was different from Obeah.
Myal seems to have emerged as a kind of counterforce or a more communal practice. In the late 1700s and early 1800s, you see the rise of these Myal societies. These were groups that performed public dances, drumming ceremonies. They claimed to be able to identify witches and sorcerers, both black and white, and to pull the evil out of them.
It sounds like a community cleansing ritual.
It was exactly that. They would dance themselves into a trance state. The amber, which was often just a clear marble or a piece of glass, was used to see into the spirit world. They would find buried Obeah charms and dig them up, neutralizing their power.
It sounds like an exorcism of the trauma of the plantation itself.
That is a beautiful way to put it. It was a way to spiritually cleanse the community of the poison of slavery. And it was often strictly anti-sorcery. And they saw the planter's power, his guns, his whips, his legal documents, as a kind of powerful sorcery, as evil. And Myal was the spiritual warfare designed to counteract that evil.
So when they danced, when they drummed, it wasn't just a party. It wasn't just letting off steam.
No. It was a battery recharge for the soul. It was a way to reclaim their bodies and their spirits. The planter owns my body from sunup to sundown. He can make me cut cane for 12 hours. But at night, when that drum beats and the spirit rides me, I am connected to my ancestors. I am connected to God. I am powerful.
And this spiritual worldview, this prepared the ground for Christianity when it arrived later.
It dovetailed with it perfectly. When the Baptist missionaries arrived in the early 1800s with their talk of being possessed by the Holy Spirit, of baptism by full immersion in the river, of spiritual warfare against the devil, the Myalists said, oh, we know this. This is what we already do.
They just translated Christianity through a Myal lens.
Exactly. And that's why the Native Baptist churches became so powerful and so revolutionary. They took the Bible, but they mixed it with the drum and the possession trance. And that powerful mixture, that Afro-Christian faith, became the ideological engine of the 1831 rebellion. It gave them a God who was on the side of the oppressed.
A God who wanted them to be free.
A God who demanded they strike the blow for their own freedom.
Which leads us perfectly to the idea of resistance. We know about the big rebellions, the wars. But this deep dive is really about everyday resistance, the things that happen between the wars.
Resistance is a whole spectrum. On one end, you have burning down the Great House, total war. But way down on the other end, you have dropping a tool.
Accidentally, of course.
Accidentally. Oops, the handle of the hoe broke. Oops, the cartwheel came off in the field. Oops, I forgot the gate was open and the master's prize cows got out and trampled the young cane.
Plausible deniability.
Exactly. This was called day-to-day resistance. It's a work slowdown. If everyone on the gang works just a little bit slower, the planter loses money, but he can't punish everyone. If everyone feigns illness on the same day, oh, my belly hurts, what can the doctor do?
It's a form of industrial sabotage.
It is. And then you had petit marronage.
Which means little running away.
Right. This wasn't running away to the mountains to try and be free forever, which was grand marronage and very dangerous. This was just taking a break, disappearing into the bush for 3 or 4 days to visit a lover on another estate or to visit family or just to rest your body. Then you'd come back and take the inevitable punishment.
Why do that if you know you'll be whipped?
It was a way of saying, I control my time, even if it's only for a few days, you don't own all of me. It was seizing autonomy, however briefly.
And we can't forget the Kwashi personality.
Who is that?
It's a performance. The enslaved men and women would often act stupid or clumsy or happy-go-lucky in front of the white people. They would play the role the master expected to see. Oh, sorry, massa. I mean, I understand what you mean.
While secretly being incredibly sharp and observant the whole time.
Exactly.
Well,
it was a mask of docility. It made the white people underestimate them terribly. They'd write in their diaries, oh, our Negroes are simple folk. They aren't smart enough to plan a rebellion. And meanwhile, the enslaved are using that invisibility to plan the rebellion right under their noses.
So all of this, the drumming, the markets, the family bonds, these small acts of sabotage, it all just accumulates over time.
It's the groundwork. It's the training. You cannot have the massive Christmas rebellion of 1831 led by Sam Sharpe without these decades of spiritual and social preparation. Sam Sharpe was a Baptist deacon, yes, but the structure he organized on was built on these very networks we've been discussing. The Myal networks, the driver networks, the market higgler networks.
The daily grind created the muscle memory for the uprising. Precisely. They preserved their humanity, they preserved their connections to each other, and they preserved their fighting spirit through the so-called quiet years, so that when the time finally came to light the torch, the fuel was already laid and waiting.
It really, really changes how you look at this period of history. It's not just a story of victims waiting to be freed by abolitionists in England. It's a community actively surviving and pushing back every single day in 1,000 small ways.
Refusing to be property. That's the absolute core of it. I am a man, I am a woman, I am a child of God. Your ledger says you own me, but you cannot own me.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm just struck by the title again. Cane, whips, and drums. And it really feels like the drum is the most important one in the end.
I think so. The cane was the circumstance they were forced into. The whip was the obstacle they had to endure. But the drum was the solution. The drum was the answer.
The drum was the heartbeat that never stopped. What stands out to you personally when you look at this entire day in the life we've walked through?
For me, I think it's the Sunday market. The image of a woman who has been treated like a beast of burden all week, putting on her best, brightest head wrap, walking miles to town, and then standing there and haggling with a white soldier over the price of a yam and winning the argument. That moment of dignity, that moment of, I am a business person, I understand value, that to me is the victory.
For me, it's the names. It's the simple fact that they kept the African names alive, whispering Cuffy or Kwashi to a newborn when the master wasn't listening. It's such a small thing, but it's a thread. It's a thread that connects them all the way back across the ocean. It's unbroken.
And that thread is what we're pulling on today. It connects that history directly to the present. The incredible resilience of Jamaican culture today, the music, the language, the food, the defiant spirit, it was all forged in that fire. It was cooked in the boiling house and beaten out on the drum.
Yeah.
And we have to remember, this isn't just history. For so many listeners of the ABENG Signal, this is ancestry. These aren't just characters in a story. These are great-great-grandparents.
The people who survived the boiling house are the reason we're here today.
The women who walked 15 miles to market with baskets on their heads are the reason there's a generation today. Their endurance is in the DNA.
It's incredibly humbling. You realize that your bad day at the office, well, it really puts things in perspective.
It certainly does. But it also, I think, issues a challenge. They fought for their dignity with every tool they had. Silence, song, poison, prayer. What are we doing with the freedom they bought for us with their blood and their sweat?
That's the question to leave on.
That is the question.
Okay, we're going to close the book on the daily life of 1760 to 1830, but the story isn't over. So, as we wrap up this walkthrough, a single day, from the morning horn to the nighttime drum, why does this matter? Why focus on this quiet resistance instead of just the loud wars?
Because if we only look at the wars, we see moments of desperation. We see the final violent outcome. If we look at the daily life, we see the foundation being built. The Obeah, the Myal, the markets, the kinship networks, the patois. These were the tinder.
The tinder.
The dry wood that was being stacked day after day for 70 years, just waiting for the right spark. You cannot understand the explosion of 1831, the Baptist War, which we will cover next, without understanding the 70 years of psychological and spiritual preparation that happened in the dark, in the slave villages, every single night.
They were rehearsing for freedom.
Every single night. They were building the networks, the confidence, the economic independence, and the spiritual power to eventually stand up and say, enough.
That is a powerful place to land. We've walked the ground, we've felt the heat, we've heard the drum. Now we know what's at stake.
We know the pressure that was building in the boiler.
Next time, on our next deep dive, we're going to watch that boiler explode. We're going to connect this hidden daily world, this spiritual warfare, to the physical storms of 1831 and 1865.
From the whisper to the shout.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. This has been episode 10 of the ABENG Signal. If you felt the rhythm of this history, if you learned something about the holing or the igglers, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more uploads.
There's always more to uncover. Always.
Let's keep the signal strong. Bye-bye. See you on the next episode.
See you in the next episode.